Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'll be working on my Thuja occidentalis. This tree was collected and it's undergone a lot of changes from when I collected it to now. I'm styling this tree to look like an old growth western cedar. Let's go back in time from the day I collected it and through some of the major steps to get it to this point. Yesterday our club went out on our annual Yamadori Day field trip. For a collected tree, this tree has a pretty good root base. It's got a lot of radial roots, a lot of fine roots. So I think we'll be in good shape. I'm pretty confident that the tree's going to live after potting it. So I'm going to take the tree into the sun and we'll rotate it around and you can get a 360 view of it. Okay, so we'll spin the tree around. You see it has a really big trunk, which, you know, doesn't matter how big the trunk is, it matters what quality it is, how well it's developed. So we've got a great big branch out the side here, big thick one here, and another big thick one here. This top one is very splintered. I don't know if it'll stay alive or not. And we've got a good leader growing up the top here to replace the dead stump that was cut off. I think with this tree, I'm going to end up removing a lot of the parts I don't like and growing a lot of the tree. I want this tree to look like a miniaturized version of an Eastern White Cedar that you would find in an old growth forest. So a lot of these branches down low are just too low to the ground. If you imagine a person, maybe this high, walking through the forest, all these low branches wouldn't be there on a mature tree. They would be way up high in the canopy. So I think for starters, I'm going to have to remove some of these lower branches. And it may involve this great big thick one here and the thick one up here, because they're just too thick compared to the base of the tree. There we go. Here's what I'm left with after pruning off those large branches. You can see it's a more of an upright tree. It looks more realistic. It looks more like a tree you would see in nature. I'm going to come in now with my carving tools and carve the wounds nice and flush. So I'll just prune it back to here. And we have a new leader taking over here. The next steps for this tree will just be to let it grow and recover. It's been 2 years since I did a video on this tree, so it's time for an update and to do some more work to it. This isn't some kind of new soil or ground cover underneath the tree. It's snow. I just brought the tree in from outside. Here's an overall view of the tree now. I think all my work is done today on it, so I think this would probably be the front of the tree, somewhere around here. Okay, I'm going to take it back to the bench now and start the root pruning. I've got the tree back on the bench now, and right away, remember that one root that I said wasn't coming very radial? Well, underneath it is a root that is radial, that's lower down, and I can use that instead of this root. I don't like this one thick one here. It kind of is growing crooked, so I'm going to take part of it off. I'll take the part up to this other root junction here off. So here I go. Like that. And I gotta cut a little deeper there. There. So that comes off. So you can see there's a more of a radial root coming off of it here. So that's looking much better. That was a look at the history of the tree. You can see it's changed from a low spreading tree to a more upright tree, and it's got a lot more growing to still go. I pruned this tree up in spring and all the new growth has come in now, so now I want to go in and further refine the branch selection And a lot of these shoots are getting too long, so I want to pinch off some of the growing tips and just do a general tidy up on the tree so it can continue to grow for the summer. I do want my upright trunks to continue growing and thickening up, but I want to manage the growth that's coming off them to keep them tight and compact to give that cathedral style to the tree. Let's look at some pictures of that cathedral style now. This picture really shows those vertical cathedral style branches reaching skyward, and there's a lot of deadwood on it, but a really nice picture. This picture shows an old growth cedar, and you can see the size of the trunk and that the foliage is, very tight to the trunk as you get up to the top of the tree. Here's a picture of a cedar that's died, but you can see that cathedral type top on it. This used to be alive and it would have had that same type of structure with the living branches. In this picture, you can see the old growth cedar, and then you can see the branches the way they come down and then they shoot skyward, so you get that vertical growth off them. So that's kind of what I want my branches to look like. I want them to all go vertical like that, and I think that'll look very cedar-like, and that's what I'm after. I'm after that unique characteristics that you see in an old growth cedar. It's unlike any other tree. Here's a drawing from the U.S. Department of Natural Resources, and it shows a western red cedar developing from age 50 years old, up to over 1,500 years old. And you can see the progression from the conical type shape to the development of the cathedral type crown that you see at 900 years, and then even more of a cathedral type structure as it gets really old. The cedar that I'm developing will be closer to that 1,500-year-old look, where I have those multi kind of branches and a shorter trunk. That's a look at the style that I'm trying to get for this tree, that western cedar look. The last time I repotted this tree, I did a lot of root work to it, getting the roots sorted out to a nice radial pattern, because I want the roots to feed the branches above, and it leaves these fluted ridges on the trunk. So you can see that starting to form here. This part of the trunk goes into the ground and there's a root there. So it creates this nice kind of rib pattern around the trunk, which you see in old growth cedars. So it should look really good in the far future. There's a lot of roots where I've had to prune off roots. So my first step for today, I'm going to get the root rake and just see how the root base is doing beneath the soil line here. When you prune off large roots like this, there's always a danger that it could die back all the way up the trunk. You'll get this ribbon of dead wood going up the trunk. Seems to be okay in this case. I don't think I've killed off this section of the trunk. So let's get out the root rake and start doing some combing now. All right, here I go with the root rake, and I'm just going to comb away and just see what's happening just below the surface of the soil. And then I'll fill it back in. A lot of these roots that I cut off, like here and here, there were better roots down below that I used. So eventually, I piled the soil up quite high around the trunk of the tree. So eventually the tree will be lifted, or the soil line will be lowered on this tree, and you'll see more of these surface roots. But for now, I'm keeping them covered up, and they'll be exposed someday. Now, when I say I, did a heavy root pruning last time, I did it carefully. It wasn't just, cutting off roots. I made sure there was kind of a root below that I could replace the root with. I was, fairly cautious, but I did do a lot of root work. And if you don't do a lot of root work, you will never get really beautiful surface roots. You might get okay ones just by luck. I mean, trees in nature naturally do get a fairly radial root system on them, but I don't know, in bonsai pots, it's not always the case. I think the roots are doing really well below the soil line there. I'll give it a spin so you can see them all. and then I'll cover them back up. We'll just let them keep growing and developing. The little pill bugs that are crawling around at the base of the tree, they only eat decaying organic matter, so they don't attack the live part of the tree. They'll help break down, stuff in the soil, so they're actually beneficial to the tree. I'm going to start the pruning today by removing a lot of branches that are growing in towards the center of the tree. I want them all fanning outwards. So there's one right here that was growing across the center of the tree, and get rid of that. You especially want to clean it out at the base of your structure. As you get higher, you can have branches that kind of come in towards the center. As this cathedral style, you want each of these branches, these upright branches, to become a tree of their own. I'll get the tree on the turntable, and we'll start looking at the styling. Here's an overall look at the styling I'm trying to get. So all the branches down low here that are growing in towards the center of the tree have been removed. And as you get higher, then each one of these vertical trunks becomes a tree with branches coming all the way around it. So almost like a triple or quadruple or 5-trunk tree, with them all growing beside each other, but all having tree-like branches. On this cathedral type style, it's important to have the branches growing vertically to give that old growth look to the tree. This one's on a bit of an angle, so I think I'll have to wire it vertical, and maybe some of the others, just to give it that vertical cathedral style. I'll have to really watch my wiring. I don't want vertical trunks if they have spiral wire marks in them, but I do want the trunks vertical, so I'll have to be very careful with the wire that the tree's not growing out into the wire and causing scarring. Because that trunk is so thin, I'm going to try using this flexible plant ties. It's kind of a rubberized wire, and I'll wire it around the trunks and see if I can get them vertical. All right, here I go. I will anchor the wire around the base of the trunk behind it, the thicker one. This wire doesn't have much holding power, but I think it'll do the job. I don't know. Okay, so that's anchored to the back branch or trunk. And now I'll bring it across and up and around the branch I want to wire. Being careful not to trap some of the smaller branches under the wire. Something like that. Now I'll try and position the branch vertical. So I'll bring it up here and vertical. That's good. And then I'll cut the excess wire off right to here. So that held this little branch in a vertical position, and that'll slowly thicken up into a nice trunk. I've got some heavy branches in this upper section. You can see one here that I'm hoping to get rid of entirely. There is a nicer branch underneath, and you get this a lot on these Thuja trees. You get some back budding near the base of a branch, and you can just cut off the thicker branch and replace it with the finer one below. You can't do that thick branch removal all at once. You've got to wait for these back buds and the smaller delicate foliage to grow in. But slowly over the years, most Thujas or cedar trees, I find that you can eventually reduce all your heavy branches back and get the nice fine ones that you can further develop. So here goes that thicker one now. Off it goes. That one's off. Now I'll show you the branch that I'm replacing it with. Let's have a look at that area now. So here's where I removed that thicker branch. You can see the pruning point, and below I have a really fine, delicate branch growing, and I've got one off to the side. So there's plenty of choices for the future, removing my thicker branches and keeping the finer ones, especially up near the apex. You can see at the top of the tree, right here, there's those rocket branches. They shoot up, they grow very quickly. They don't have a lot of branching off them. They're kind of coarse looking. They're good if you want to develop thickness in your branches or trees or trunks, but they're pretty useless if you want to develop that branch. So whenever you get that rocket type growth on a branch, usually it's removed because it's just useless. However, in this case, because it's near the apex and I'm trying to thicken up all these vertical trunks on the tree, I leave it on, and then in the future, you know, once it's helped thicken it all up, then I prune it off. My next step for the tree is to do some general maintenance type pruning to these branches, eliminating crossing branches, pinching out the tips or cutting the tips off to keep the branches compact, and just that kind of general cleanup on the tree, and then I'll let it grow again for the summer. I'm going to begin up in the apex of each of the major branches, pruning them to a conical type form, shortening my branches, but always letting my leader grow up. This is close to the front of the tree, and I've already removed that one thick branch in here. But I still have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 branches coming from the same area. And that's going to create a problem in the future, this area right here. I do need to remove some of the branches. So hopefully up in the apex here, I can remove some of the thicker, coarser branches and replace them with these fine, delicate ones to keep my apex kind of in check so I don't get these thick, coarse branches coming out of it. So I'll look at the front and I'll decide what branches I'm going to remove in that area. I like all the branches out front, but there is a thick one towards the back, right there, that I think that's the one to remove, for starters anyway. So here I go. Like that. I'll continue the pruning now, the maintenance type pruning. It's hard to know when to stop pruning. You know, you want perfection in your branches, but you've got to keep enough green foliage on the tree to keep the tree healthy and growing. So I think that is it for the pruning today. I think, you know, I got some areas resolved. Let me just rotate the tree around to the front. I think that's probably the front, somewhere around there. I've got that thickest trunk line coming up near the front, and then I've got another one slightly behind, and the dead part of the middle in the center of the tree. So yeah, I think that's a good start to this cathedral style. This tree's really, as I say, it's really come a long way since I first dug it up. Had those really thick low branches and didn't have the best root system, and slowly I think it'll get there. It's going to take many years. If I was to guess, I would guess maybe 10 years before it's kind of becoming a showable tree. But who knows, we'll see. I've got all these stones here that I place on top of the soil. And it's not to hold the tree in the pot, it's to stop the birds coming in and kicking all my soil out. Any exposed pot like this where there's a large surface area, the birds just land on the edge of the pot and they start digging in there for worms. So I put these rocks all around the surface of the soil, and that solves that problem. I've never had a problem with birds digging in this pot after I did the stone treatment. So I'll water the tree first, water and fertilizer, and then I'll place the stones back on top of the soil. All right, here I go with the water. I think it'll be really exciting following this tree into the future, watching the trunk develop, these cathedral-style branches developing, the tree getting more and more of that ancient cathedral style to the top of the tree. Yeah, it's a tree I really like. Here's a look at the amount of foliage I took off the tree today. Not a whole lot, but enough. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm just going to cut it up and spread it across the surface of the soil. And it makes a really nice ground cover. If you ever put a tree in a show, you can have this nice kind of fall colored foliage on the ground underneath the tree, and it looks really good. And as it decomposes, it helps feed the tree. There's a look at the base of the tree now with the cut up foliage underneath it. That'll turn brown and it'll look really good in the future. You can do this with pine needles. You can cut them up and place them under larches. I've got my pile of larch needles still over here that I'm waiting for them to turn brown. Then I'll cut them up and I'll use that as a ground cover for a show someday underneath the forest. So that is it. You can see the scars on this cathedral style tree are healing nicely. Yeah, it's coming along really well. I will have to someday carve this stump, the original leader that was cut off. That was done when I collected it. It was in the pathway, this tree, and it was cut down or hacked down, and so I've been regrowing these top branches. So I'll place the rocks on top of the soil now. I can just put them right over top of those needles and they'll decompose there. So this will really help keep those birds away. It's worked well so far. So there, so it's just covered so they can't dig in there very easily. They don't seem to even try at the edges or anything, so that's good. Yeah, I think that'll do it. So let's get out tree number 2 for today. Tree number 2 for today is my Austrian pine. And the reason I have it out is I want to further reduce the branches now. You can see out here, I didn't cut back too far because I wanted these other needles to develop. And they're starting to get there now that I think I can start to reduce some more of these branch tips, cutting them back. You can see there's enough needle density on the branch that I cut the tip off now. At least I hope. That's the plan. We will see how it goes. I'm going to start with my lowest branch here. So I'm hoping I can remove this tip here to get the profile in check. So here I go. I'm going to leave a bit of room for dieback. Here I go. Just like that. I'm also going to reduce the tip here. I've got lots of foliage back in here and the needles have come out and they're doing well, so I can remove the tip here like that. I can remove this one to here and this one to here, leaving a little bit of room for dieback. And I'm going to cut. I've got to cut this one back. There's a good bud here, but it's just too long out of the profile. So I'll cut it back to, there's a bud back here. Cut it back to there. Just pinch out these old needles. they've done their job. Just taking out some more old needles there, or some dried up needles. Now there's a branch here that it cuts across all the other branches. So I'm going to remove that one. It's a duplicate branch that I don't need. Off that goes. There's one going straight up here that I don't need either. I'm going to get rid of that. Like that. And that's got that branch nice and compact now. Here's a look at the tree from the distance now, and you can see that number one branch is nice and compact. The needles are nice and small. That's looking much better. Even better now without that one needle sticking up. I'm going to go up from that branch now and do the one that's directly above, pruning that back. Alright, let's see what I can do in this branch. I've got some good buds in here. Am I confident to take the tip off? They're not really developed really well, but I think it's enough to get the sap flowing. I have a lot of needles in here. So I'll start back here. I'll take this long one off here. Like that. And then I've got one here. And there is a couple of good needles on that branch, so I think I'm going to take it back to a shoot way back there. I'll prune that part of it off. So that's got lots of compact growth in this branch. There's a shoot sticking straight up here. I'll get rid of that. It's the third shoot. I'm left with a pair there. Now, I want to deal with this branch. Got a shoot here. I've got one back here too. So I could reduce the branch. There's two strong shoots back here, and then there's 1 and 2 here. So I think I'm going to reduce it back to this one. And if that one dies off, then I've got 2 ones behind as a backup. So here I go. I'll take this one off here and this one off here. That's got that branch a lot more compact. And now I'll remove the old needles. And again, they've done their job now. The new needles can take over on these branches. If I was trying to grow, vigor in these branches to thicken them up or something, then I would leave the old needles on because they're doing work. They do generate energy for the tree. But in this case, I'm after keeping these branches fine and delicate. I'm not after growing them thick. Now I've got a shoot up top here. Let's get these needles out of here. Sorry for all the mowers today. It's just one of those days. Everyone's just mowing their lawns. I use a hand mower for our lawn, and I use wood chips in the pathways, so I have to do very little mowing, which is good with me. So I think I will take this one off here. It's kind of shading out the branch below it, so that shoot's coming off like that. And then maybe even this one that's on the inside here. See if I can get both of them like that. Yeah, that's better. So that branch is in check now. I may be able to remove, yeah, I've got some growth out here that's getting a little long. I think I'll take it back to here. And if this shoot were to die off, I've still got ones back further that I could develop again. And everything else in that branch is looking quite good. Just getting rid of some of the older needles back here. Yeah, so that branch is much more compact now. There's a look at branch number 1 and the one above it. Nice and compact, nice short needles, just what you want. I'm going to continue going up the tree up to this branch, which is shading out the one below, so I want to reduce that back. I could go way back to here, which is maybe a little drastic. Yeah, I think I've got a branch that kind of comes out this direction, and this part of the branch is directly over top of the branch below, so I'm going to do a fairly drastic pruning here and prune it off here like that, letting a lot more light down to this branch and keeping some shoots up on this branch. So, and then I can reduce the tip of this one back to here. I've got a nice shoot here and one over this side, so I'll take this part of it off like that, and I'll probably get some more back buds forming on this part of the branch so I can reduce this tip back even further in the future. But for now, I'll just prune out the old needles. Pluck them out, I mean, not pruning. And I think that's got that branch in check. I could just take the tip off this branch here. It's a little... There, just pluck the tip out of that one. There's a vertical shoot that's quite vigorous here that I'm going to remove entirely, like that. I don't think I can do a lot more reduction to this. Not at the moment. I'll take a few more of the older needles out. And I think the sun can now get at these branches, and I think I'll get a lot of back buds in that area in the future, so I will be able to reduce some of these tips eventually, but I don't want to rush it. I want to do as much as I can, but I don't want to do too much that the tree suffers because of it. There's a vertical part of this branch I can take back, so I'll take off this part like that. That's better. That gets that compact. It exposes this growing tip to the sunlight, which is a lower branch, which will continue to grow out in a nice direction. I'm up near the apex now, and there's a long branch here that I can take back. So I'll do that right back to here, like that. I can take this tip off now. These shoots are doing quite well back here. There's actually 3 shoots. There's one on the bottom, so that growing tip can come off like that. I've got some good growing shoots down here. I'm going to take this part of this branch off, making sure I keep my, this is my leader and this is my sacrifice branch I'm growing, so I want to make sure I don't touch those. So again, I'm just looking in the apex to see what I can reduce back here. I've got 3 branches growing from one spot here, so that means one has to come off, and it's going to be this one, this tall one here that's shooting upwards like that, because these are nice branches here, and maybe even this one too. Yes, this one's got to come off too, like that. The apex is just a little heavy looking up here. That's why I'm trying to reduce it, keep it light. This branch here, I've got a lot of bud activity down here and new shoots, so I could definitely reduce this one, and that would get more light to the branch below, so that comes off. And this vertical one's got to come off too, like that. That gets that branch sorted out nicely. I have a lot of congestion in this area. I'm just gonna see what I can do. Well, I can take this branch right out like that. Well, that looks a lot better. This branch, I eventually will be able to take it back. I got shoots back here, but for now I'm going to leave that part on, maybe just take a bit of the tip off there. like that. I'm going to continue to go around the tree and see what I can do about reducing branches and cleaning up a bit. But it's looking pretty good. For an Austrian pine, I've got really short needles and it's dense and compact. So I'll finish up the pruning and then we'll come back and have a look at it. Here's a look at the amount I removed off the pine. You can see that, you know, some of the branches were fairly significant. I did a lot of thinning in the apex. So now let's go in and have a look at the tree. Here's the pine. So the apex is much more triangular rather than the rounded look. And part of that is because I have my sacrifice branch sticking up with all the old needles. Some of these may be pruned back in the future. But just, you know, keeping a little vigor up there. Yeah, so that's kind of a look at it. Still a work in progress, but it's come a long way. This is, you know, the emperor's new clothes, they call it. When the pine goes from last year's needles to the new needles. It's, yeah, like a change of clothes. It really changes the appearance of the tree. Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today is an exciting day. I'm going to be reducing my Austrian pine back in size to make it more compact. So at the moment, all these needles are very miniature. You can see how short they are. On an Austrian pine that's growing, you know, in the ground in nature, the needles are really, really long. So this is miniaturized quite a bit for an Austrian pine. So yeah, it's come a long way from the nursery stock, this tree, where I got it many, many years ago. So even this branch, you know, it's not perfect, but it's looking better. I've thought about it. I did wire this tree once. You know, I brought some of these branches down a bit. I could do that again, maybe, I don't know. And I'm still debating if I should carve out part of that trunk to get rid of that bulge. I probably just should do it. I keep talking about it and trying to grow sacrifice branches and that, but I hate to do it, but I know if I do carve a section out there, it'll heal really quickly, and in about 5 years you'll never know I did that. However, I'm stubborn. Maybe I'll see how my sacrifice branch comes at the back here. I'll let this grow really tall and thick. It should thicken all the trunk up, and then I can remove that eventually. So we'll see how that goes, just as an experiment. If that doesn't work, then I'll carve that bulge. So stay tuned, you'll know in about 3-4 years from now. I'm looking at it, this is sort of the front view. You can see I'm quite a ways away. It looks pretty good. I don't mind it, I think it's looking good. Let's see if I can get closer. I'm zoomed in all the way. Let's see if I can get kind of closer down low. The closer I move, the more perspective you get, but yeah, somewhere kind of around this view. It's not too bad. Looks like a pine tree, I think. It's time now for today's updates. The first update for today are the little cedars that are growing on top of this rock. They just grew there from seeds naturally, and they're looking pretty cool. I gave it a pruning in spring, and it's doing really well. It needs a pruning again, but I'm not going to prune it today. I think that'll be a separate video. But yeah, I really like this planting. I really like the way the roots grow over the rock. I really like the rock. And the trees are just awesome little trees. The second update for today is my asparagus fern. It had quite a bald spot on it from the winter. But as soon as it got outside in the sun, it just started growing like crazy. You can see all the new shoots coming on it now. There's the trunk underneath, or the roots. So yeah, a very unusual bonsai, but one of my favorites. Looking good. My last update for today is my Schefflera. It's a large leaf Schefflera, or an Australian umbrella tree. So this tree, it had a happy accident. It was in the greenhouse, and it got too hot in the greenhouse, and everything that was exposed to the sun died. And at first, I wasn't too pleased. It was like, oh my goodness. And it kept dying and dying, and then finally it started to recover. And you can see how it looks today. So this is all dead wood here. Going up here, and you can see how these branches grow. See how there's a ring? And you can see it up here too. Very unusual, but that's how they grow. I guess they somehow, there's a live vein that goes around and then comes out and it joins. It's almost like this shape. It's like two spots on the tree, and there's a vein that feeds the branch, which is really unusual. So yeah, the tree, it died back, and then it started sprouting new branches, and so the aerial roots that were formed down here started taking over as sort of the trunk line, and anyway, it's become a really cool tree. I really like it. It's transformed an ordinary looking tree into something special, and all by accident. So yeah, it's just starting to grow well for this spring. You're getting all the fresh new leaves out, and it's looking really healthy. So yeah, it's an interesting tree. All right, one more update. This is my small leaf linden tree, and it's about to come out into flower. You can see all the flower buds all over it. This is the densest, or the most number of flowers I've ever had on it. And these flowers, they're fairly small. They're little white flowers, but the fragrance is just, oh, it's beautiful. It's subtle, but just fantastic. So I'm going to let the tree flower, and then I'm going to remove I'll deadhead it, remove all the flowers so the strength goes into growing the tree. I don't need the little seed pods. Yeah, so the tree's coming along. I'm growing this section out here thicker to take over as the main part of the trunk, and this will become a lower branch, so definitely a long-term project. But it's coming along. And I'll show you the tree when it's in flower, which should be, I don't know, maybe a week or two. Maybe not even that long. I'm not sure. That's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone. I've been looking around for welders for the truck, used MIG welders, and I haven't found one yet, so I'll keep looking. But in the meantime, I'm taking the truck into the shop. They're going to fix the holes in the floor by the driver's side. There's just a few small holes there. I'm going to get the bed. If you look at it from this view, you can see the bed sits a little high at the front, and it slopes downhill just slightly at the back. So I'm going to get that aligned so it sits properly. It kind of bugs me that it's not straight. Yeah, so when I find a welder at a good price, I'll buy it. I don't want to buy a new one. For the amount of welding I'll be doing, it's just not worth it. I'm looking underneath the truck, and there's a lip that goes underneath the truck, and there's a section right here that's missing. So I'm going to get that welded in place too. So a little bit of fixing up underneath the truck also. I've been trying to shine up some of the sections of paint, and you can kind of get a bit of a gloss to it, but there's still all this cracking and crazing in the paint that it'll never come out. So working on that. I want it to look, the best it can.
not neglected. So I'll shine it up as much as I can, but it'll never be like new or anything. And I don't want it to be. I want it to have that original patina look. So just, yeah, cleaned up and polished the best it can. I started to do the body work on this top lip. Remember, I had that epoxy putty to fill in that hole there. So it's just primed at the moment, and I've still got some sanding and that to do up there. But working on it. I had the truck out the other day picking up the wood chips, and I found that the tunnel gets quite hot here. Right down here, without the insulation and the carpeting, it gets pretty warm to the touch, like you wouldn't want to hold your hand there too long. So interesting. It'll certainly bake that paint on, that's for sure. I'm also going to get the cable for the foot brake relocated. It's supposed to go down that hole here, and instead it's being run along and it goes down the hole near the brake. So I don't want that. I want to route it properly. So that'll get corrected also while the truck's in at the shop. When I get the welder, I will be tackling areas like this. It's just, you know, needs fixing. It's when you start getting big holes like that, it definitely needs fixing. You can see up here, there's certain areas that have rusted out. I can try patching that too. It'll never look like a brand new tailgate or anything, but I'll certainly try and get it solid so it's functional anyway. The lights have a little blue diamond in them that someone's added. It used to be a real hot rodder thing. Kind of the little blue, I don't know what they call it, cat's eye or something in the lights. It's kind of cool to have. There's also something with the bed at the back here. If I lift up on the fender, the whole bed shakes. So I think there's something not bolted up quite right underneath. So I'm gonna have a look at that too.